What is up, everybody? Mr. Curtis here. Welcome to Unit 5.7. We're going to talk about the fighting in World War II. When we're in class, we'll talk a lot more about this. We'll go into a lot more details, a lot more specifics, but this is just kind of bare bones, what you need to know for the Regents. Just a few kind of quick things, and we're going to hustle through this. So it's 6 years of fighting. It goes really from 1939 all the way through 1945. But I just want to kind of get into some of the basics here, just some note stuff, real quick, real easy. A lot of stuff hopefully you heard about before. But in terms of major events, there's a couple different things that are going on here. Just a couple of important events to know for the Regents. And again, we'll get into more specific details about this in class. But the war starts on September 1st, 1939. The Nazis and the Soviet Union invade Poland. And the Soviet Union strategy is a word it's a German word called blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. If you're a football fan, the word blitz is when, and if you don't know football, I'll explain it, is when the defenders try and attack the quarterback and send as many people as possible. Blitz is a German word meaning lightning, and this is a lightning war. So what the Germans did in Poland is you drop bombs, you fly airplanes over, you drop bombs, and then you invade with soldiers. You do it fast, you do it quick, you catch them off guard, and that's the strategy that the Germans are going to use a lot of places. And once the Germans, if you remember, what we talked about before is that the French and the British and the League of Nations are appeasing Hitler, letting him take over places. This is kind of the final straw in Poland. They say, we're going to declare war on Germany. And this is the official start of World War II as Britain and France declare war on Germany. Unfortunately for the French, they're going to get overrun by the Nazis with the Blitzkrieg strategy again very quickly in 1940. But in 1941, although Hitler and Stalin had an agreement and an alliance together, Hitler turns his back on that alliance and invades the Soviet Union, which is another very important moment as Germany invades the Soviet Union. And we'll talk more about this in class. You're going to hear me say this a couple times here, but the Germans invade the Soviet Union, but they get stuck in the wintertime. So they almost get to the capital of Moscow in 1941, and they kind of run out of gas and they get stuck. And when you get stuck in the wintertime in Russia, it's not good. And it's going to lead really to one of the downfalls of the Nazi military as the Russians are going to push back. Also in 1941 in December, which I'm sure everyone knows about, is the attack on Pearl Harbor. This gets the U.S. involved in the war. And really what the war breaks down to is these allies right here, which is the U.S., Britain, the USSR, and the French, who are still, even though they were conquered, those who escaped went to Britain and are going to fight. And then the Axis, which is Japan, Germany, and Italy, are going to be on the same side. And what we're going to end up having in this war is two fronts or two areas, unlike in World War I, where it was all fought like here and here in Europe. This is really a truly global war in terms of where we're fighting. So we have this war here in Europe between, like I just said, the Russians who are here, or the Soviet Union, and Germany, along with Britain, the U.S., and France. And then in the Pacific here, we have Japan. The primary group fighting in Japan, if you like military history, is really the United States and allies. We have Australia involved over here as well, which is still at this point very closely tied with Great Britain. But we have war in Europe, war in the Pacific. And in terms of what's going on, this is all very, very similar to World War I. Some people think World War I is just a continuation, or World War II is a continuation of World War I. And similar to World War I, we have a total war. Again, total war is when all people and resources are expected to be involved. It's not just the people fighting. It's very different to war in the 21st century or the 2000s, where you're fighting overseas and people back at home almost forget that there's even a war going on. This was very much in people's minds, and there's a lot of moving pieces to this. And similar to World War I, World War II is going to ask colonial people, those countries that have been imperialized, to help fight for the government. And for example, they tell the Indians, again, people in India, if you fight for us, this is the British talking, if you fight for us, we will give you your independence when the war is over. And people line up again to help fight for the British Empire against Germany. There's going to be French, African soldiers. The Vietnamese fight on behalf of the French. We have in the United States, in terms of oppressed people, we still have segregation in the South. We have the Tuskegee Airmen, which is made up primarily of African Americans who are being discriminated against with Jim Crow laws in the South. So we have people who are volunteering, who step up. These people are fighting for freedom against Nazi Germany. If you heard this, people in World War II are fighting for freedom, fighting for democracy around the world. And all of these groups of people are going to come back home after the war and be like, I just fought against the Nazis for freedom. And then I come home and I'm still discriminated against. And it's going to lead to a second sense of nationalism, of independence. The World War II vets in the United States who are African American are going to be on the forefront of the civil rights movement. Indians are going to come back and say, we need our independence now. This is ridiculous. You can't have us fight against Nazi Germany and then we come home and we're discriminated against. It just doesn't make sense. So it's going to lead to this increased nationalism after the war, which we'll eventually get to. Also, factories are going to hire women again. They're going to produce military goods again. We have Rosie the Riveter here, which I'm sure you've seen at some point. We're going to transform car factories into factories that make tanks. We're going to really focus on the building of planes. We're really going to have this push of women building and working in factories and producing these military goods, whether it's uniforms, whether it's ammunition, whether it's planes, tanks, whatever the case might be. And those people who can't fight in the war, who are men, are also going to be in these factories as well. Again, same as World War I, we're going to reduce food consumption. There's going to be a focus on rationing of you can only buy a certain amount of food. So you get a ticket here to get gas. People are going to be asked to not waste things. If you're going to, instead of throwing away old towels, oil, rubber, whatever it is, to give it to the war effort. And they're going to have drives to produce or to collect these things to use on the home front or on the war front. We also have propaganda. We're going to see propaganda posters where people are going to be convinced of a certain message. We looked at World War I propaganda posters. We'll look at World War II propaganda posters. Very much nationalistic pride, looking down or drawing our enemies in very animalistic ways and propping up ourselves as being the ideal way, whether it's the United States looking at themselves ideally, whether it's the Soviet Union, whether it's the British, Germans, whoever it might be. So again, these are our four things that are total war: colonial and oppressed people, factories producing military goods, reducing food consumption, propaganda. And we also have exactly the same as World War I. There's a lot of comparisons between the two. We have a whole bunch of new technologies. We're dropping bombs from planes now, huge explosions, huge destruction. We have a large increase in casualties. Instead of just targeting, like World War I was just fought between soldiers. People weren't coming from, we weren't targeting cities and innocent people. World War II is going to target innocent people. The U.S. is going to firebomb cities as we have trouble and we get stalled in certain areas. We're flying our planes over cities and dropping bombs, killing whoever is there. It's indiscriminate, meaning like we're not just targeting a military site. We're not just targeting where we think Hitler is. We're targeting places where we know innocent people are, or in quote unquote innocent people in the minds of the United States. The U.S. and the British and the French are going to kill almost 500,000 people in Germany through their bombs. Japan is going to do this. We're going to do the same in Japan, killing almost 500,000 people. And the people at the time, and the U.S. says it's war. Everyone in Germany is a Nazi. Everyone in Japan is taking up arms to fight against us. We have no other way but to break the morale. And this becomes a question later of, is it ethical to kill innocent people, to accidentally drop a bomb on a school, to drop a bomb on a neighborhood, a suburban neighborhood? Is that okay? And this is an ethical question that's still asked today. Also, we have the atomic bomb that's going to be developed, and we will spend a lot of time talking about this in class, but it is going to be dropped to end the war in the Pacific. In Hiroshima, it leads to 80,000 deaths. Nagasaki, immediately 40,000, and another 100,000 in each place that are going to be injured with radiation poisoning and might end up dying later. So, and I'm sure you talked about the atomic bomb at some point, but we'll talk more about it in class again. But this new technology leads to these increased casualties, leads to the death of civilians and not just military personnel. And it causes a lot of destruction and a lot of questions in the aftermath of the war. And really the big questions after the war is done is, and this is going on even today, is what do we do with the losing countries? We can't punish Germany like we did in World War I. Can't punish Japan like we punished Germany in World War I. That didn't work. So what do we do with those countries that lost the war? What do we do to avoid war in the future? How do we prevent it? The League of Nations was unsuccessful. We can't just go around appeasing everybody who wants something. We need to figure out a way to stop this in the future. Do the colonies get their independence? Do they deserve their independence after all this? What kind of governments are going to be created? Are they aligned with us? How does this going to work? And then the last one is what happens to the Jewish people who survived the Holocaust? These people who survived the camps, who now have nowhere to live, who've been displaced for 6 years. And by displaced, I mean don't have anywhere to live. What do we do with all this stuff? And these are going to be the big questions that we'll address as we talk about the effects of World War II. But that's the basic short version. I hate to do World War II fighting in 10 minutes, but we'll talk a lot more about it for the last time. We'll talk a lot more about it in class. You got any questions, you write it down, you let me know. I'm out.